multiple personalities, that they really may have multiple entities that are attached to them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very good point. Multiple personalities often indicate that there's something going on inside of a person's aura, inside of their energies, that is related to other entities. Absolutely.
There are those that believe that if you do talk to dead people, that you've crossed some sort of boundary. Do you feel like you've ever crossed some sort of boundary that you should not have done when you've talked to some of these things?
Did I cross a boundary that I should not have done? Not yet, but I'm very careful of the cases that I take. There are some people, when you talk to them, that they don't want to get rid of their attachments or their entities, but there's some secondary gain that they get from having the entities with them. So in those cases, I don't really deal with the entity. I don't deal with the case at all.
Now, I'm
very careful about the problem cases that I accept.
Okay. That reminds me of a case. I was on the streets of Indianapolis, and this man came walking by who was talking to no one, and I just stopped. I wanted to know. I said, "Hey, who are you talking to?" And he said, "Well, I'm talking to the devil." And I said, "Well, I'm going to cast the devil out." I figured I could. I just, I figured I got to do something, man. He wasn't asking for money or anything, so I figured, well, you guys walking around talking to the devil, I guess I better get rid of the devil. So he told me, "No, you're not." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, the devil does things for me." And I said, "Well, how many devils do you have?" And he said, "Well, I have 2. I said, "Well, what are their names?" He said, "Well, it's the devil and his wife." So I'm just wondering, you said that sometimes people become attached to these things and they really like what they do for them. But do you think at any point that there could be some masquerading going on here, and that these so-called helpers and attachment that they don't want to get rid of could possibly have their ill in mind?
One of the things that's very consistent about attaching entities is they always have an agenda. And you're lucky if they give you the entire agenda. Sometimes an entity will tell you exactly why they're attached and what they want. Most of the time, they won't. They'll tell you part of it, or just enough to get you somehow interested in what they're doing, but they won't really reveal all of it. And that's if a person even knows they're there. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, the person doesn't even know they're there.
So they can get what they want. What if you don't give it to them? What if you just say, "Get away from me, spook! You ain't getting whatever you want"? Do they lash out at you, or they go find somebody else that will give them what they want?
Well, when they want to cause problems, most of the time it is in their best interest to stay hidden from an individual. Okay. If they reveal themselves, then the ego, the personality that they're attached to will have a better chance at fighting them. So it's in their best interest to stay hidden. If they are discovered, they can cause insomnia, they can cause a fugue or dissociative state where a person will black out for a while if they're driving or with somebody they care about. They can take over the personality for certain periods of time, and in that way they can discourage a person from trying to deal with them. They can also sometimes even appear or manifest to the person. And in those cases, they can really scare the person a lot.
There have been a lot of activity in the country. As I started the broadcast, I don't know if you're listening, talking about the earthquake swarms that seem to be hitting the United States, even Indiana here. We got our own couple of earthquakes, which is very strange. But a question from the live chat line there wants to know, have you noticed an increase of the entity's presence that may, I guess the unasked question would be, have you noticed the increase maybe leading to any event?
I've noticed over the last 2 months that there's been a tremendous increase in the kinds of negative entity interactions with humans that is kind of unusual. My wife is also able to see and interact with entities as well. And what we've noticed is that there's a great deal more negative thought forms. A negative thought form is not a ghost. It's not an entity. But it's a series of negative energies that are created by thoughts that people conceive that are related to hurting themselves or others, or just general destructive energy. We also have noticed a great deal more in the way of psychic entities. A psychic entity is not a ghost, but it's a very advanced form of thought energy that gets to the point of almost being intelligent. So
really?
The person, for instance, thinks of an idea related to wanting to hurt an individual. But that idea can gather strings from all the other ideas of people wanting to hurt each other, till eventually that idea begins to gain strength, and it can actually form what looks like a ghost, but it's not a ghost, it's a psychic entity. We've seen a lot more of that around. In general, we've seen a great deal more spiritual activity, especially around cars, around just the general atmosphere. It's almost as though there's a buildup, like clouds gathering before a storm.
Well, in the movie with Sigourney Weaver, Ghostbusters, that had the artistic view of an event where the ghost presence were increasing until some certain sound or some certain timing when all of the spooks was going to come to the central location, and I guess to wreak havoc upon the earth. In a similar way, could we suggest that this increased negative ghostly activity is heading to any sort of cataclysmic event, or are we going to find an all-out war with humans against the dead people?
Well, what I think is happening is that there is activity going on with the human unconscious that is pointing to a release of a tremendous amount of negative energy from the human unconscious that has been building for quite some time. If you look at the last 100 years, more people died in the last 100 years by violence than at any other time in human history. We had more wars, we had more executions, we had more mass killings. We also had just more general violence. Well, that sort of energy has a very strong negative effect on the human unconscious. As a result, that energy has to go somewhere. And when you add to that the uncertainty about the future, the uncertainty about the world itself, and then this concern about global warming, all this energy takes place or hides itself in the unconscious, and now it's like a volcano. When you put so much pressure underneath the earth, eventually the volcanic energy has to go somewhere, has to come out. Human beings are stressed. Human beings have been more stressed in the last 100 years than in any other time in recorded human history. So that energy showing up in negative thought form, psychic entities, spiritual activity, points to a release that needs to somehow balance this negative energy that we put out into the earth itself.
Wow.
It's something that we're creating, and it's affecting the spiritual world, but I think it's emanating in many ways from the physical world.
And I would dare say that with all of our super technology, that the world is not a better place and does not seem to be heading to be a better place. We have this comment, though, from one of our EDGE correspondents in Australia. Paul says that in Canberra, there was a hospital that had to be blown up because there were so many hauntings and ghostly-like activities there. Have you ever heard that?
I have not heard of that.
Well, it looks like Canberra, Canberra hospital. It's a hospital. And I guess he said they had to blow it up because of the demonic, or not demonic, I guess ghostly, severe hauntings is the actual verbiage there. So, but I don't know that blowing up a building is going to take care of these dead guys. And we're going to have to call an expert, say like Dr. Gibson in to get rid of them. Have you been called to a location to get rid of these spirits rather than say more than just a person who has to deal with these hauntings?
Well, I get called quite frequently, but like I said, only about 10% of my work has to do with entities. For the most part, what we do is we help people with spiritual gifts or spiritual abilities that come to the surface that they don't understand and don't know how to deal with. Well,
Doctor, would you say, and I like the term spiritual gifts there, I suppose, the ability maybe to look beyond the sort of fleshly